Matt Grosso here, creator of Xenoplicity and the queue system that it runs on. Today's video, just a really quick video on problem players. How do you handle them in your game? Well, I'll tell you how you don't do it. You don't handle problem players by being passive aggressive in the game system. You don't kill a player character just because you have an issue with the player. You don't strip them of their equipment or penalize them in some way, in the game for an out of game problem. Because here's the thing, issues with problem players at your table, it's fundamentally an issue of communication between you and another player. If there's a player that's being disruptive, if there's a player that is having a bad attitude, or maybe for whatever reason, they're causing, immersion to be broke at the table. Maybe they constantly reference jokes and movie quotes. Maybe they want to constantly stop the game to talk about something that happened at work or at school. Or like I said, maybe it's just a bad attitude thing. It doesn't really matter what their issue is. These are all things that can be addressed with having just a conversation with you and that player. Now, depending on the situation and my own experience, there have been times where I've just stopped the game and just called the person out directly and said, look, you got to stop, or hey, focus, like we're playing a game here. There's a time and a place where that's appropriate, especially if you know that person and you know the group that you're playing with, and they're going to respond to that in a way that makes sense. There's other times where I have not addressed it during the game, and instead I've waited till the session was over, and I've kind of pulled that player aside and had a conversation with them before they went home, or even sometimes even called them up on the phone after the fact. There's an aspect to this where there needs to be a case-by-case way of dealing with these players, because there's so many variables. And one of the variables is just what approach are they most likely to respond well to. You need to know your players. So if these are people you play with on a regular basis, you need to know whether or not they would respond better in a group setting confronting the issue, or whether it's more of a private conversation, whether they're going to do better about this over an email or a phone call, or whether you should talk to them face to face. In my experience, I don't have very good luck communicating through text messages or through emails. I don't like to communicate that way. There's too much that can be misunderstood, or maybe tone is difficult at best to get across in the correct fashion. So I prefer to have physical conversations with someone in person. But you got to do whatever's going to work best for you and that person in trying to solve that issue. But again, it all comes down to communication. You have to communicate. I mean, at the end of the day, tabletop role-playing, it is a social game. It is a game designed to be played with friends or with people around a table together. And so the issues that can come up from a problem player are almost always a result of just a poor sense of communication between you and some of the other players at the game. So because of that, the positive is that through communication, a lot of these issues can just be fixed, and they can be done away with. But for habitual line crossers, people that are just constantly being an issue, there may come a point where you have to just sit them down and say, like, look, this isn't working out. I just don't like your attitude, or I don't like the energy you're bringing to the table. People are not having fun with you. But you got to be careful about this. Like, don't be a jerk and exclude someone from a game just because their personality is a little different than yours. We are all unique in our own way as people. And part of the fun of a game with tabletop role-playing is that you do have a varying dynamics of personalities all interacting with each other, both at the table and also in the game world. So I encourage you, like, don't kick someone out of your group just because you don't see eye to eye with them on every issue. You shouldn't, and you won't, because no two people agree on everything. Don't exclude people from your game because they have different politics than you, or because they have different tastes than you have. These are silly things, because what you're doing is you're taking real world issues and you're putting them into the game. You're taking real world issues and then you're interjecting those to your game night, and that's a bad practice. So if you're going to address an issue with a player, don't do it in the game world unless it is a game world problem, right? You have to distinguish between a game world problem and and an issue that's actually at the table, right? So I'll give you an example. Let's say you have a character in the game that is causing an issue because he won't take prisoners. He wants to kill people that he captures. He doesn't want to release them or let them go or negotiate with them. He just wants to take their life and execute them. Well, the thing is, there are some characters where this mentality makes perfect sense. There's situations where this makes perfect sense with immersion in the game. But not everyone at the table, maybe not all the players that are actually in that adventuring party, maybe they don't all feel the same way, right? So you can have conflict and obstacles among the group, among the party members. Maybe you've got an issue where one character will steal from another character, but in the scope of what's being done, it still makes sense narratively. Well, if that's the case, then you got to roll with those punches, because that's just them playing their character. And I know the old expression, "Oh, I'm just playing my character," that has been used to prefer to just do terrible things in the game. And I'm not condoning all of those things. I mean, oftentimes this is a childish response to a person who's just not playing well with others. But there's a context within the game where it's okay to play your character, and your character doesn't always have to get along with the other characters. But there has to be some level of agreement that these characters are coming together to play a game, because it is a group game, right? So there has to be a reason where these characters come together and are cohesive on some level. Not that they have to get along with everything. They can have disagreements. They can have fights. I mean, think about movies that have like large ensemble casts. Look at the Avengers. Okay, that's a good example. They all bicker and fight with each other, right? But at the end of the day, by the end of the movie, they all come together at that final act to take on the bad guy as a united front. You have to have something similar in your own table. That dynamic has to exist on some level. So again, they don't have to agree on everything, and I don't have any issue with one character stealing from another, or one character lying to another in the game world, as long as it makes narrative sense and there's a purpose and a reason behind it, not just childish angst and just being difficult to be difficult. Like if that's what you want, then I would address that with the player. Now, for issues where the characters act in ways like, let's say they go into a town and they just start murdering people. Well, that's not a player problem. I mean, you might say, well, the player's controlling the character. Okay, yeah, that's fine. And if it was like a repeat thing where that's all they did every time they played the game, yeah, there might come a time when you have to sit down and actually have a conversation like that. This is not the way you play this game. However, if the character is going into a situation where they are just attacking people or stealing from people, the thing is when characters do things in the game world, those things should have consequences to them. So if it is a in-game problem, meaning that the characters have done something that they're going to suffer consequences for it, well, then just deal with the consequences in the game, right? So those characters become wanted by the law. Posses go out looking for them to bring them to justice. They've got bounty hunters after them. Guards come after them. These kind of things. People won't give them lodging. They're constantly being, the authorities are constantly going to be called on them when they enter a town, or they get detained at the gate. There's a lot of different ways that you can handle that in game, where you don't really ever have to have a bigger conversation with the player, because players, as they play the game and they see that there are consequences to their actions in the game, you'll find that players mostly are going to then adjust their play style to live within the confines of the parameters of that world. Okay, they're going to make it work, because they realize that if they don't, then they're going to get killed or imprisoned, and then that character is retired or dead. There's a way to address issues in the game for in-game problems, but for bigger issues, for things that are happening at the table, whether it's a player being disruptive or whether it's a player deliberately trying to sabotage and ruin the game by having their character act in ways that are not fitting for their character or that are not in keeping with the world and the setting, yeah, sure, have a conversation with them. Be polite, be respectful, but be stern. Okay, if you're running the game, it's your game, and you don't need players, disrupting it and causing issues because you've put time and energy into setting it up. You're likely hosting the event, and so it's rude for players to not respect that and to not, be part of the collective fun at the table. There's a time and place for this, and I think maturity comes into this too. When I was younger, I made a lot of silly decisions as a game master and as a player that now I look back on and go, that was cringy. I shouldn't have done that. So you also have to be patient, especially if your gaming group has people at various ages. In my own group, there's some people my age, there's a couple people older than me, and then there's some people in my group that are much younger, right? And so I try to be more patient with the younger players because they haven't been playing as long. And it's wrong for me to hold them to a standard, as a younger player, both just not having as many years in the hobby itself and also just being younger in general and just not being as mature. It would be wrong for me to hold them to the same standard that I would someone who's a veteran in the hobby or someone who's even older than I am, right? So it's okay to hold players to different levels of a standard based on their own experience with tabletop gaming, in the hobby, how many years they've been playing. But at a certain point, there needs to be ground rules set in place, and this is a big part of it, guys. You have to set proper expectations, and you should do this when a player enters your game group. You should do it at the beginning of a game. If you're making new characters, set the expectations from the beginning. And when you do that, you'll find that a lot of these issues never come up because they've already been addressed. The expectations have already been set. They've already been put in place. If you set proper expectations, then most players are going to operate within those parameters, okay? And if they don't feel comfortable with that, then they won't play in your game, and so, they would leave or just say, no, I'm not okay with that. And then you say, okay, well, there's the door. And again, you don't have to be rude about it, but if it's your game, you're going to set the ground rules, you're going to set the expectations, and you do it from the beginning, and so there's no surprises. Everybody knows what to expect. Everybody is fully aware of what's going to happen every game session, and you don't have people that are causing you issues at your table. At the end of the day, be nice, be professional, okay? There's no reason to be rude. Even if you're going to address problems, you can still be respectful of the person and just address the issue. And again, leave emotions out of it. Don't make it emotional, okay? Just address the issue and let the person know that you want them at the table. The more people at your table, the better, but that they do have to follow the expectations you've set. They do have to kind of get in line and make sure that they're not acting in a way that's disruptive or problematic at the table. But also, don't be so picky with what you expect out of people. Some of the players that I play with have very different role play styles than I do. Some of that is what makes the game fun at the table, is having all these wildly different personalities interacting with each other, both at the table and also in the game world. And so if you try to make everybody act uniformly, you're doing your table a disservice. Another thing is just because a player controls and plays their character in a way that it's not how you would do it, that doesn't make it wrong. So you got to be careful that before you throw out, well, that's not how they would act. Well, who are you to say that, right? Yeah, sure. There's a grossly, there's like gross misconduct for a player character if they're acting just in a way that's wildly outside the scope of what a character would act like in this world. I get it. That can happen, but you have to be careful that you're not trying to control the way the players play their characters. They are their characters. You as a game master get to control every NPC in the whole world. Let the players control their own characters how they want to control their own characters, and really only call out behavior that is just abnormal and strange and incoherent if it truly is that. But even if it's not the decision that you would make, That doesn't make it wrong. And even if it's an action or a course of actions that you would never think of, that doesn't make it bad. So you got to be careful that when you're having these kind of conversations with players, that you're not overstepping your bounds as a game master, because I've seen that too often. That game masters want to control their players in a way that's not healthy. They want to try to dictate how player characters should be controlled and played, and I have very little patience for that. Like, you know, get off your soapbox and get off your pride and your arrogance, and realize that the game is not just about you. Okay, even as a game master, you are the game master, but that doesn't mean it's all about you. It's a collective storytelling game. Everyone is playing together. The game is played by everybody at the table, player and game master alike. And so you just got to be careful that you find a balance, okay? Anyway, guys, those are some thoughts I had on the subject. Let me know what you think below.